Welcome to Star Lens, your trusted source for the real stories behind royal events. I hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was the worst royal engagement I ever did. A royal wedding I ever did. And I traveled the world with him and I did really enjoy working with him. But, now I really don't care if I ever see him again because the way he's behaved towards the king and our queen and his brother. And this is the story of Harry though. Ever since he decided to leave the royal family and go his own way in the United States. And his just behaving, I think, sometimes appallingly. Certainly, some of the things he said about members of the royal family, certainly Camilla and Catherine and his brother. I think Meghan as well, referring to that Oprah Winfrey interview about, the royals are racist in many ways because they question the color of Archie's skin was a bit stupid. And also, as I say earlier, it was a little bit insulting. I mean, the thing about when Harry's ever spoken about the Queen, he speaks with absolute love and respect. This story doesn't start with rumors. It starts with a man who stood close enough to history to touch it. Arthur Edwards, royal photographer, more than 40 years inside the monarchy. He photographed births, weddings, funerals, moments that defined the royal family across generations. And when he looks back at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding, he doesn't hesitate. He calls it the worst royal wedding he ever worked. That alone should stop you because this isn't someone chasing attention. This is someone who has seen everything and is now saying that what the world celebrated as a fairy tale was something very different behind the scenes. Subscribe to Star Lens now. Don't miss the truth behind royal events. On television, the wedding looked flawless. The music soared. The carriages rolled. Cameras glided over smiling faces and designer outfits. It felt historic, emotional, perfect. But Arthur Edwards describes it all as performance. He says, Meghan delivered the moment like an actress. Every movement landed cleanly. Every expression played to the camera. It worked. Viewers were swept up in it almost too well. This didn't feel like a family ceremony that happened to be filmed. It felt like a broadcast event built from the ground up to be watched. Celebrities who barely knew the couple filled prime seats. Faces familiar from red carpets, not royal life. People chosen for how they would look on screen, not for what they represented. To Edwards, it felt less like tradition and more like showbiz, not a wedding rooted in history, but a debut dressed in royal clothing. Step away from the cameras and the atmosphere changed fast. Inside Windsor, the heat was suffocating. Guests were packed tightly together, dressed in formal wear, forced to sit for hours with little relief. Makeup ran, faces flushed, fans fluttered non-stop. The mood wasn't joyful, it was strained. Arthur Edwards, who had covered royal events in every condition imaginable, called it the most miserable royal engagement of his career. Not because of the weather, but because it felt like no one cared how the people inside the room were coping. The priority wasn't comfort. It wasn't experience. It was optics. Stay tuned to Star Lens. We reveal what really happens behind the scenes. On television, the wedding looked flawless. Off-screen, people endured. And in that gap between what was shown and what was lived, the truth of the day quietly revealed itself. This wasn't a wedding designed to be felt. It was a wedding designed to be seen. And once that becomes clear, everything that follows starts to make sense. In royal life, seating is never casual. It's a signal, a hierarchy, a public statement about who matters. And at this wedding, that statement was loud. Arthur Edwards described senior royals, military figures, and long-serving family members, people who had carried the monarchy for decades, pushed quietly into the back rows, not honored, not highlighted. Meanwhile, the front seats told a different story. Celebrities, industry friends, faces chosen not for service, but for visibility. People the cameras would linger on, people the audience at home would recognize. This wasn't about family. It was about optics. Guests noticed immediately. Whispers spread. Looks were exchanged. Because when tradition is broken this openly, everyone in the room feels it. The wedding had started sending signals. And they weren't subtle. Royal weddings have always followed one unspoken rule. History is shared. The monarchy allows access. The press documents it. The world remembers it. That rule didn't apply here. Arthur Edwards says photographers were pushed back unnaturally far. Long lenses were forced into use. Positions awkward. Sightlines blocked. Coverage restricted to the point of absurdity. Don't forget to subscribe to Star Lens for exclusive royal insights. And then there was Harry. Instead of acknowledging the cameras, he avoided them, turned away, shifted positions, blocked shots, not discreetly, but deliberately. To Edwards, it felt like punishment. Harry was angry about press coverage of Meghan during their engagement, and the wedding became the place where that anger played out, not privately, publicly. The result was historic, and not in a good way. For the first time in his career, Arthur Edwards walked away from a royal wedding without a single usable photograph published. Not one. That doesn't happen by chance. That happens by intention. Every royal photographer knows the moment, the carriage ride. It's the image that defines the day, the one replayed for generations, the shot history remembers. Arthur Edwards was positioned exactly where he needed to be. The carriage approached and then Harry and Meghan looked the other way. They didn't glance. They didn't miss it. They held their gaze away from the cameras. The carriage passed. The moment disappeared. And with it, the image that should have sealed the wedding into history. For Edwards, it wasn't just disappointing. It was symbolic. This wasn't about privacy. It wasn't about nerves. It was control. By that point, the pattern was undeniable. Guests arranged for appearance. Tradition sidelined. Press treated as an enemy. History denied in real time. The wedding wasn't chaotic. It was managed. Star Lens bringing you the real story behind royal headlines. And as the ceremony ended, many guests hoped the reception would soften the edges, that once the cameras relaxed, warmth would return. What they didn't know was that the next chapter would reveal just how intentional the entire day really was. After the ceremony, many guests believed the worst was over. Surely, once the cameras relaxed and the vows were done, the reception would bring warmth. Royal weddings are famous for that part. Grand tables, flowing champagne, food that reminds everyone why monarchy is built on abundance and tradition. That's not what happened here. Instead, guests were met with what Arthur Edwards could only describe as a glorified cocktail hour. No lavish spread, no hearty pours, just finger foods, tiny canopies, small bites that looked elegant but disappeared in seconds. People who had sat for hours in suffocating heat, dressed in formal wear, were left hungry. And the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. This wasn't generosity. This wasn't hospitality. It was minimalism dressed up as modern taste. To Edwards, it felt deliberate. All presentation, no substance. A wedding that looked rich on camera, but felt thin in reality. Guests smiled politely, but whispers spread. Some laughed it off, others were quietly offended, because royal weddings aren't supposed to leave people searching for dinner afterwards. And by this point, a pattern was impossible to ignore. Subscribe now to Star Lens. We keep you informed on every royal truth. Arthur Edwards doesn't describe a groom overwhelmed by the moment. He describes a man already at war. According to him, Harry carried deep anger towards the British press into that day. He believed coverage of Meghan during the engagement had been unfair and harsh. And instead of separating those feelings from the wedding, he let them shape it. The result was a ceremony laced with tension. Cameras avoided, photographers blocked, access restricted at every turn. This wasn't about privacy. It was about punishment. For Edwards and others doing their jobs, it felt hostile, as if the wedding itself had become a tool to settle scores. A moment meant to unite. Instead, became an opportunity to send a message. And that message was clear. Cooperation was over. The wedding didn't calm Harry's resentment. It showcased it. Here's the part that makes Arthur Edwards impossible to dismiss. He didn't always speak critically about Meghan. In fact, he openly praised her early days working as a royal. He described her as warm, engaged, and impressive on the road. He called her a genuine asset to the family, someone who showed promise. That matters because it tells us this wasn't about instant dislike. It wasn't prejudice. It wasn't bitterness from the start. Something shifted. And by the time of the wedding, that shift was visible in every detail. From seating to press treatment to how tradition itself was handled. When someone who once admired you starts describing your defining moment as a disaster, it forces a harder question. What changed and why? Star Lens. Your window into the real royal world. Arthur Edwards' account doesn't land like a complaint about heat or bad angles. It lands like a warning because when you line up everything he witnessed, the performance, the discomfort, the control, the hostility, the wedding stops looking like a celebration and starts looking like a declaration. A declaration that this would not be a normal royal story. This wasn't a blending of families. It was a line drawn. If royal weddings are meant to strengthen bonds, this one quietly weakened them. If they're meant to welcome, this one restricted. And if they are meant to preserve tradition, this one edited it out in favor of image. What the public remembers as a fairy tale was behind closed doors, the opening act of a fracture. And that's why this story still matters, because the tension people noticed later didn't appear out of nowhere. It didn't suddenly explode in interviews or headlines. According to the man behind the lens, it was already there, visible, deliberate, and carefully managed on the very day the world was told to celebrate. And once you see the wedding this way, you can't unsee it. It wasn't the end of a love story. It was the beginning of a reckoning. And everything that followed exactly as promised. This was Star Lens, uncovering the truth behind the royal fairy tales. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you never miss the real story. Stay informed.